The Drink Beer, Think Beer podcast is sponsored by Beer Edge. I'm Andy Crouch, the co-founder of Beer Edge, along with my partner and your podcast host, John Hall. John and I work hard to bring you fresh and insightful content related to the ever-changing world of craft beer. We're passionate about beer and independent journalism. If you're interested in supporting Beer Edge, visit our website, beeredge.com, which is updated regularly with new content, interviews, and articles. Please also consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your episodes. You can also subscribe to the Beer Edge newsletter on our website. Is there anyone you think that we should be talking to? Please drop us a line at andy@beeredge.com with your thoughts. And as always, thanks for your support.
Hi, this is John Hall, and welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. This week, I'm talking with Jennifer Yuengling, who is a sixth-generation, soon-to-be owner of the Pennsylvania brewery that bears her family name. More in a moment, but first, I'm happy to tell you that this episode is produced by Beer Edge. Check out beeredge.com for articles, podcasts, and to subscribe to the newsletter written by myself and Andy Crouch. Also be sure to follow Beer Edge on social media at The Beer Edge. So, DJ Yuengling & Son is the country's oldest operating brewery, going back 191 years now. It survived major events over the course of 6 generations, most notably Prohibition, and really hit its stride in the mid-1980s when Dick Yuengling Jr. purchased the brewery from his father and began making Yuengling Lager, which is the company's flagship beer and accounts for 80% of overall volume. As the brewery, often referred to as just the family last name, looks to its 6th generation, it is Jennifer, the vice president of operations, and her 3 sisters who are poised to take over the brand and continue the family tradition. To stay competitive in a crowded beer marketplace, she says innovation is key. The brewery has continued to release new brands and find new partnerships to stay top of mind with its customers across 22 states. Yuengling is also the country's largest craft brewery, as designated by the Brewers Association. But Jennifer is more interested in using the word independent, something the whole company is proud of being, she says. Jennifer spoke to me from the brewery in Pennsylvania, and when your name is on the building, there seems to be an extra layer of responsibility. So I started off by asking her about her earliest memories of being at the family business. Here's our conversation.
It's interesting. And when my sisters and I were growing up, and I'm the oldest, our dad broke away from the brewery during the 70s and the early 80s, and he had a beer distributorship locally here in Pottsville. And, my first really exposure to the industry was from the distributor side, and it was a small distributorship he had. But my initial memories of the beer business were going to the wholesaler warehouse with him and helping him stack cases and, working the hand cart and the cash register. And then it wasn't until my early teenage years that he became involved in the brewery. He purchased it from his father in 1985 that I really started to become more exposed and understand the beer industry and all that it had to offer.
So those teenage years, though, spent at the brewery after your father purchased it from your grandfather, What sort of struck you at the time? Teenage years, we think of them as sort of formidable years, and formative years, I should say, and formidable as well for certain things, but certainly formative years. What was it like being a teenager and having a brewery as the family business?
Yeah, it was my role and my part-time work at the brewery during those years. I worked as a tour guide, and at that time we didn't have our museum and our gift shop set up, so we were operating it solely out of the old brewery. And what I remember most is the passion that our consumers and the tourists came in with. How excited they were to see our operation and so hands-on. It's a very unique tour. I think you mentioned that you were on it a couple of years ago, but
Yeah.
We actually take you right onto the packaging line. At that time, we would take you right into the brew house, and that was the only brewery we had. So we were packaging bottles, cans, kegs, take them down into the tunnels, and their feet were actually getting wet with beer and
Sure.
and
So
water
no
running
OSHA violations, of course. Yeah.
No, I know. Well, that was years ago. Yeah, so just the passion of our fans, and I just remember how dedicated our workers were, because we were starting to get busy during those years, and they were working long hours, and they were passionate about what they do, and had a real pride in their work.
When you say, well, I want to get back to that sort of ramping up in the mid to late '80s, but there's got to be a certain pressure that comes with, having your last name also be the one of the brewery, especially when people are coming through. And it's, I think for so many, heritage brands and long-term brands, there's it's sort of auspicious in a lot of ways to be connected with the family, or, to be the namesake of the brewery. Did you get that impression when you first started working there and giving these tours? Was there sort of this, standing on the shoulders of responsibility, or was it just sort of like a fun family thing?
I wouldn't really say pressure. I think it's taken me time, obviously, from when I was a teenager to where I am in my career now, to understand and appreciate the work ethic and resiliency and the perseverance of not just my family members and ancestry that came before me, but the hard work and dedication of the workers who have gotten us to where we are today, and also the passion of the consumers. So I look at it more as an opportunity, really not pressure, not obligation, but every day you come in and you learn and you hear stories of how the industry used to be, and we went through some pretty lean times. Prohibition, of course, when all brewers were going through lean times.
Yeah.
But even in the 50s and 60s, and we were just considered a small local coal region brewery, and my great-grandfather and my grandfather, they struggled to make ends meet. So it's more years of learning and appreciating what the generations before my sisters and I, what they accomplished and how they were steadfast in maintaining the business.
Was it always the plan to go into the family business? Did you ever think of exploring other paths, or?
Yeah, I certainly did. My dad was really good about exposing my sisters and I to the company, but never putting the pressure on, and letting us know that there's opportunity here if we were interested. And, it wasn't until I got into my early 20s that I decided that, it was time to come back home to Pottsville and immerse myself into the operations end of it, which is where I found my niche, and really learn from my dad, learn from the workers that we have here. And we've got some great folks. We even have multi-generational workers, not just from my family side, that have worked here for decades. So that's kind of my history and my path to getting to where I am now.
And for your sisters as well, was it? I don't mean for you to speak on their behalf, without them here, but I'm curious because, typically when there's multiple siblings, you might have one or two or even three, break away from the family business. We've seen it with other breweries, generational handoffs. It strikes me as sort of unique that your sisters are also involved in the brewery as well and getting ready to sort of take on this mantle.
Yeah, I mean, we're very proud that the four of us are involved in the business today, and I think it really makes us even more unique than most businesses. And everyone kind of followed their own path prior to coming into the brewery. Some of us, we continued our schooling. Others went into other industries. But however that path led, it eventually, obviously, got us back here to Pottsville, and we've all kind of molded ourselves based off of our skill sets and our talents and our interests to different areas within the company. And I think that helps make it work even better, because Wendy deals a lot with sales and marketing and human resources. I've got operations. Debbie works as our employee cultural engagement manager. Cheryl works in order services. So we all have different touch points every day. So in essence, we're not necessarily tripping over each other or causing redundancy.
And I guess the plan is that the four of you will take over the brewery when your father retires. He purchased it from his father. Is that the plan for you four to purchase it from him?
Yeah, that's the typical German way. It doesn't just get handed down; it has to be bought out. But our dad is still very much involved. He's here every day. I don't know that anybody will ever outwork him, and as far as we're concerned, he's got a lot of years left in him.
Okay, so but that's sort of the plan right now, though, is still family ownership.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, our intention is to remain independent well into generations beyond us.
That's I wonder how much that's a conversation that you all have, because we've seen it with other brewing families that are multi-generational, that at some point a new generation decides that this isn't for them, and they sort of give up the ghost. They sell the business to somebody else, or just decide to close it down. When you have 6 generations now, and you're looking towards, as you're saying, many future generations to come, is there even a way to ensure family control down the line? Is there? I mean, obviously, like, once we're all gone, whatever happens, but it sounds like it's something you're thinking about.
I think we've certainly been thinking about it for 6 generations. And again, we go back to the hard work and resiliency and the success that we've had throughout the years, and it inspires us and gives us greater appreciation for what those generations have gone through. And we have succession plans in place, and we have every intention of continuing as America's oldest brewery, family owned and operated, and remaining independent for years to come.
As we've seen so many breweries open up in the last 40 years or so, and certainly in the U.S. here, we're somewhere around 8,000 or so breweries, and a lot of these are small family-owned businesses. And I've had conversations with small brewers who are, not doing the the millions of barrels like you all are, but they're doing 1,500, 2,000 barrels a year. But there's a hope that a lot of them have, that one day their kids will take over. And what's often striking to me is when I'm having these conversations with brewers, the children that they want to take over are about 3 years old and running around and playing on the brewery floor. As somebody who has been in the family business and seen your grandfather at work and your father at work, what do you think is the smart tack for brewers to take, if they do want their children to take over one day? What are some of the lessons that you've experienced or seen firsthand, that you think could apply to some of these other brewers that are hoping to become a multi-generational business like you?
All right. Well, I think you have to have realistic expectations, certainly about what the industry looks like on any given day or any given decade. I mean, it's a much different industry today than it was 20 years ago. And my dad will say that when he purchased the brewery in 1985, there were just over 130 breweries across the country, and now there's, what you mentioned, over 8,000. So you have to be able to adapt and innovate, have a passion for what you do, have a strong work ethic. And when you look at today's current market, it's really a unique and challenging time for not just any industry and business, but the beer industry itself. And we've had to be nimble and adapt, certainly over the last couple months, because we saw a huge impact on sales from the on-premise side of things. So we were able to transition our workers and divert and work more towards the off-premise side and cans and bottles and different pack types that the consumers were looking for.
Have you seen? So I aside from the passing of the torch sort of advice, though, I am curious about COVID, and I wonder if you can go a little bit deeper as to what these last 6 months have been like for the brewery, and sort of what changes you've made.
Yeah. So much of our sales, we skewed more heavily towards draft. It was close to 30% of our business pre-COVID.
Wow.
So it impacted us much more than it did, I think, many other brewers. So we were nimble, and we were able to spend more of our production time on can packs, bottle packs. Essentially shut down our keg line for several weeks until on-premise accounts started opening back up. But we saw consumers hit that pantry loading in late March, early April, and we also saw them gravitating towards our core brands, or I guess what you could refer to as comfort brands and the trusted, tried and true that they had confidence in. So that kind of speaks to the strength of our lager brand, which is our flagship.
Yeah.
Has been for about 30 years now. It's about 80% of our sales.
Wow.
So in that,
Okay.
yeah, and it's been, it's done well for us over the years and gotten us to where we are. But at the same time, we've also had the opportunity to innovate. We have our Golden Pilsner, which has been out for 2 years now, and then Flight by Yuengling, which is unfortunately just rolled out when the pandemic hit. But we're starting to see a lift in that, and the fact that cans are seeing such a huge amount of growth. I believe craft beer, about 50% of the craft beer dollars come in the off-premise channel comes from cans. So being able to introduce our Flight 16-ounce can this summer was a big shot in the arm too.
So lager is clearly the flagship by far. 80% is I mean, that's something incredible. And that brand, you sort of alluded to this, as things started to take off in the mid 80s, that brand really sort of came into life, right? In the late 1980s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was 87, I believe.
Yeah. I what's interesting to me when I first read that, and then I remember I talking with folks at the brewery about that is, for a brewery that is now 191 years old, having a flagship that is just a fraction of that time, or has only been around for a fraction of that time, surprises me, because we think of some of the the older breweries in the U.S., like Budweiser or Miller or Pabst, that have had some of these flagship brands for multiple decades, if not longer. 30 years strikes me as not a ton of time in the brewery's lifespan. What was it about that particular beer at that particular moment that really captured the attention of the consumers, do you think?
Well, I think that was a period of time where it was really the first wave of the craft beer revolution, and at the same time, Jim Koch with Boston Beer came out with his lager, Boston Lager.
Sure, 84, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's what consumers were looking for. They were tired of the mass-produced yellow fizzy beers that were out there that didn't have a whole lot of character. And when my dad introduced and formulated lager, he wanted a beer that had a different flavor profile, a little bit more sweetness to it and body. And it was the right period of time for that entrepreneurial kind of spirit, and that's what consumers were looking for. And it just really caught hold in the state college market, Penn State University, Philadelphia market, Pittsburgh, and they just ate it up, and we've been growing ever since.
It's amazing to me traveling into Pennsylvania, and I do frequently, but most bars that you go into, if you just say lager, you're going to get a Yuengling put down in front of you, which is not something that happens, as far as I know, in any other state. People ask you, which kind, or, what would you like? But, that you have this sort of identity in Pennsylvania. Is that something that translated when you opened up the brewery in Florida, or is that a different market and a different beast?
It took us some time to grab a foothold in the Florida market, and to be upfront with you, when we bought the Tampa brewery, majority of that beer was transported up into our mid-Atlantic states to satisfy the demand and the need at that time in the late 90s, early 2000s, because we couldn't make enough beer out of our old brewery. Mm-hmm. And until we had the time, it took about 2 years to build our new brewery. We needed the beer. So before we opened the southern markets, most of that beer that was produced in Tampa was coming up into our Pennsylvania, Jersey, Delaware kind of footprint. And then it took us some time. We started slowly opening southern states, Florida, South, North Carolina, Georgia. Right now we're in 22 states total. But it took us some time to have consumers recognize who we are, understand that we have 2 breweries in Pennsylvania and 1 in Tampa, Florida. And right now Tampa is our largest operating brewery and Florida is our largest market. So it kind of goes along with our whole cultural growth model is we're slow and steady, and very methodical to ensure that we don't lose sight of the quality beers that we produce, and that's kind of what sets us apart.
That was striking to me that it's 22 states, because there are breweries half your size, even a quarter of your size, and even less than that, that have 50 state distribution at this point. And I know there's usually fanfare, by some beer fans whenever you open up a new market. I remember a few years ago when you pushed into Massachusetts, there were people who were incredibly excited about it. Ohio, people were thrilled about it. How do you decide when is the right time to open up a new state? And is it difficult to sort of practice the restraint of not just doing 50 state distribution?
Well, I don't think it's difficult, because we kind of joke internally that it's taken us 191 years just to get to 22 states. So we want to make sure we leave some for the next generation. But I think, again, it all plays into our culture. We want to be slow and methodical. We want to be sure we're making the right steps. We tend to go into contiguous states too, joining states. So we're not jumping all over the map. We pay close attention to our capabilities and our capacities. And then logistics. So we want to be able to produce a case of beer in Pottsville or Tampa, Florida, get it logistically to that consumer, and yet hit the price point that we want to hit, so that we're not, and you take trucking and transportation in there too. We're just about at our limits of how much further we can expand. We've got a couple more states in the New England market that we can look at, but that's kind of the way we digest and do our due diligence when we go into new markets.
So there's no, I've talked with brewers before who, have a 5-year, a 10-year plan, or for what they hope, would happen. It seems like that's really not like on a whiteboard somewhere at the brewery for you all.
Not so much. I mean, we put a lot of focus on our core markets, and we want to make sure our core markets get back to growth. And we've got a lot in the pipeline in terms of innovation. Our Golden Pilsner, our Flight by Yuengling, which we're super excited about. We've got some, we had a collaboration last year with Hershey, so we're coming up on our Yuengling Hershey Chocolate Porter, second year.
Are you going to do that again?
Yeah, so we're focused on those things, and kind of the way COVID has hit the world, we really had to take a step back and focus on the opportunities that are right in front of us. So
I understand where Flight came from. We're seeing obviously the rise in the low-cal, low-carb beers. Michelob Ultra has been rising through the most popular ranks over the last couple of years, and it sort of seems to be the new trend of promoting a healthier lifestyle when it comes to drinking beer. The Pilsner, though, I'm curious as to how that was created and what niche you saw for that, especially given the success of lager.
Yeah, Pilsner adds a little bit of a different flavor profile to our core brands. We feel like our lager, light lager, black and tan, they all kind of play in that same circle. Whereas Golden Pilsner, we look at it as refreshment style, more for outdoor activities, social activities, being outside, and that's the play we put on that. And if you look at the flavor profile and how it was formulated, it's a slightly more astringent, drying, different type of bitterness from the hops. So I think it's capturing a different consumer for different different appearances, rather than with our core three brands: lager, light lager, black and tan.
Can we talk about black and tan for just a second? Because it is such a throwback for me, in thinking of hanging out with my grandfather at a local bar, and black and tan usually meant the combination of two different beers, a stout floated on top of a lager, or vice versa, I guess. But what is the recipe? Like what is Yuengling Black and Tan?
So Black and Tan, it's a blended product. So what it takes is our premium beer, which is a lighter Pilsner style beer, and our dark brewed porter. So we blend the two of those, and we have that available in bottles, cans, kegs, and it's been one of our staple brands. And that might have been the brand prior to lager that really started to gain some awareness with consumers in the late 80s, outside of our local county and our local territory.
Is there still a market for it today? I mean, you're saying it's in the top three, but it does seem, I don't know. It seems like it's both, timeless and I don't want to say dated, because I don't necessarily think it is. I think it's a fun thing, but is it something that resonates with younger generation of Yuengling drinkers?
I think so. It might be considered maybe like a throwback style brand, and definitely with the collaboration that we have going with Hershey, it's rejuvenated it somewhat. We're super excited for the Hershey chocolate porter to come out again this year, because last year we just limited to a certain portion of our footprint. It was our first ever collaboration with another company, so we took slow steps to be sure it was the right partnership. So we're just excited that this year it'll be out in all of our states.
It was interesting. I saw, and I heard a couple people, make mention that, in the craft space right now, there's a lot of pastry stouts, people who are, putting chocolate into their beers or donuts or whatnot. Yuengling was one of the last brands that I think a lot of beer drinkers would think would do something like this, putting candy into a beer. How did that beer come about? Who started that conversation, and how did it evolve into the product that a lot of us had last year?
That's a marketing question there. The marketing gurus will say, "Oh, who started it first?" But I think I think they were very conservative going into it too, because obviously
Hershey's was.
Yeah, our Hershey's was, simply because they cater candy to children, so they were very conservative, and they did their due diligence on their part, and they've got some great experts, food scientists that our brewers have been working with over the last couple of years. That they really hit a home run with the flavor profile and the brand that we have coming out.
It really did taste like a Hershey bar. When I had it, I was served it blind at one point, and I had been reading about it in the news, obviously, and sort of immediately put it together as to what it was, because it has that sort of unmistakable Hershey chocolate taste. Was this like a syrup or powder, or were you guys actually just unshucking bars and throwing them in the mash? What was the process behind it?
Yeah, so we use some of the Hershey chocolate products that they make, and then it's worked in with our dark brewed porter. So it's our original porter recipe, and then we use some of the Hershey ingredients to get that chocolate flavor.
You've been talking about innovation and bringing new brands out. Obviously, for a certain segment of drinkers, especially in the craft space, hoppy beers are the most sought after. And I know you all did a India Pale Lager a few years ago, and I'm not sure if that's still being made.
It's not. That was part of our seasonal profile. So we had our IPL, and then summer wheat, and then Oktoberfest. So we would roll those three kind of around the calendar. And in some ways, we felt like seasonals were getting a bit diluted in the marketplace, so we stepped away from that. And now, obviously, the only seasonal we have out is our Oktoberfest. It's the largest seasonal beer across the category. So we did discontinue the IPL probably for 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah, but has there been talk of getting back into the hop arena, because there is an incredibly hop forward beer? I mean, not just because I know hops are going into the other beers you're making, but I don't know, is that something that's still sort of batted around? I know it's
Part of our profile, our beer profile, is we have what's called a Lord Chesterfield Ale. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It's more of a local brand. We refer to it as a heritage brand because it does go back to one of the original recipes back in the 1800s. So I would characterize that as an American-style pale ale. It's definitely hop forward. It is dry hopped. The BUs come in around a 30 or a 32. So it's not overly powerful from a hop point of view, but more so than any of our other brands.
But and obviously still being predominantly a lager brewery. I know sometimes that always doesn't translate into, making IPAs in the way that, consumers are looking for it these days. But do you think we could ever see like a full Yuengling IPA as part of a regular portfolio, or is that just, I feel like brewers also have to be interested in making beers as well and have, a good reason to make a beer. And
Yeah, I mean, nothing's out of the question, but I think what we're focused on right now is our newest brand, the Flight by Yuengling, really getting that rolled out after a bit of a sluggish start during COVID, and we've got these 16-ounce cans coming out, and early next year we'll have it in 12-ounce, 12-pack cans. So that's really our focus for the short term.
We've used the word a few times, or I have, and you mentioned the category as well. Early on, you described the brewery as family-owned and independent. And independent has been a big word used by brewers that are not ABI over the last couple of years. But there's a change in the Brewers Association's definition as to craft a couple years ago after some breweries that were also generationally owned, like yours, made a pretty loud noise about it. To my knowledge, I haven't really heard too much about your brewery embracing or even saying much about the craft moniker. Is craft something that you all think about when it comes to Yuengling and the brewery, or is it just like a nice designation that somebody else gave you?
Well, I think when you talk about craft beer, it's an adjective. It can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And, to me personally, you mentioned independence, and that's a big factor in it. It has to go with the spirit that's been embodied by our brewery since we began brewing in 1829. And at the core of who we are as a brand is being independent and unique. And I also, when I think of craft, I think of pride too. It's brewers and operators and everybody involved in the whole supply chain process of taking pride in what they do and contributing to DG Yuengling being America's oldest brewery. And it's our traditions and our beer that are steeped in that kind of entrepreneurial spirit that makes craft beer so different and attractive to consumers.
Was Jace Marty from Shells wrote a pretty impassioned letter to the Brewers Association's board a couple years ago, and some other breweries kind of signed on it. Was that something that your brewery was interested in at the time of being designated as craft when the National Association was saying that you weren't?
We're honored to have that moniker and to be named under that umbrella, but we just continue to display the cultures and the values that we've had for 191 years, and the fact that we are attractive to consumers and we're sought after by consumers. That's what's important to us.
You bring up this sought after by consumers, and I think it's the longer a place is around, the more a history sort of grows. And every once in a while, something will pop up in my news feed that somebody is boycotting your brewery again. If it's union issues from years ago, or even in the 2016 election when your father seemingly endorsed then candidate Trump, and people are saying, "Oh, we're gonna boycott the brewery." Do those threats or those stories ever bear reality to you all? Like, do you actually see the impact of people saying that, or is this just something that makes headlines in certain places for a few minutes and then kind of disappears?
I think first and foremost is we're not a political organization. We're not a political business. What we strive to do is find opportunities to create opportunities for our consumers to discover what's unique about our brand, launching new brands and staying focused on innovation and our quality products. And, I think with the longevity that we have, I don't know that we would be here for 191 years if we weren't doing the right things.
It was interesting, though, because, you're saying you're not political, and I think that, by and large, brewers lived by that for a long time. When the president's son visited in 2016, leading up to the campaign, it was sort of this striking moment where, politics did seem to enter into a small business. And in the last 4 years or so, we've seen a lot of breweries of all sizes become, politically active and taking, political stances. And, I think there's, curiosity on the behalf of the consumers as to where, companies stand. As you get ready to sort of take on, this ownership role, down the line, is there a thought as to where the brewery would stand on issues, or when you might want to get involved in certain social or political or life moments that are happening?
I think what's most important is being able to connect with fans and consumers, and that's really been a top priority for us now, really more than ever. And we have to be creative and find new ways to connect with those consumers with our brand. And we've been doing some of that through social media, live stream activations, and we've brought on a couple different brand ambassadors this year to really promote some of our newer brands and ones that we already have had for several years. We have a country music star, Lauren Elena, who's our flight brand ambassador. We have a celebrity chef, Kelsey Bernard Clark, who has teamed up with my sister to host a cooking class online. Consumers can learn how to make beer mac and cheese using our famous, our traditional lager. So I think those are the routes we're going to keep that connection with our consumers.
When you think about some of these, relationships or the live streaming as well, I imagine there's got to be a challenge of being 191 years old and appearing young and modern and trying to connect to a whole consumer base that has come up with real choice. You're saying there's just over 100 or so breweries. When your father took over the business, you all are going to take over when there's 8,000 or 10,000 or whatever in the country. Is there a challenge of being the oldest brewery in America, but also still talking to today's Gen Z that's coming up?
No, I don't think there's a challenge being America's oldest brewery. I think it's a tremendous opportunity, and it's a story that nobody else can tell. And we do everything we can to tell that story and sell our values and our culture and why it is we've been as successful as we have for so long. And it goes back to the perseverance and the resiliency and the generations before us being able to work through Prohibition and the Great Depression and world wars. And where we are now with the younger generation, I think these brand ambassadors are very helpful in getting us to connect with that younger generation. We've got our corporate social responsibility where we connect to our communities that have been so instrumental in getting us to where we are today. So I think giving back to the communities is a big plus in helping to connect with the younger generation.
As we start to wrap up here, and I'm curious as to your father took the business and it was at one point and he's leaving it at another. What does success look like, do you think, for you? And I'll ask you, I guess, to speak on behalf of your sisters as well, since they'll be taking this mantle with you. What does success look like when it's time for the seventh generation to take the reins?
Well, I think, our dad has certainly left his mark on not only our company, but also the industry as a whole. And, not to speak for my sisters, but as a sixth generation, I think it's up to us to maintain our foundation as America's oldest brewery, while also building upon it and then innovating for the future, for future generations of not just ownership, but employees and consumers. And we've done that over the past several years now with our Golden Pilsner, the Chocolate Porter, and now, of course, the Flight by Yuengling.
The brewery's changed names over its 191 years. With 4 daughters taking over, do you think we could see a change in the company name as well?
That's funny. We get that question a lot. Yeah, the company did. Well, we started out as the Eagle Brewery, and then when the Eagle Brewery was destroyed by a fire, it transitioned to DG Yuengling, and then DG Yuengling and Son when the second generation came online. So again, nothing's impossible.
I think it could be inspiring in a lot of ways. So, well, Jen, thanks so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks talking with you, John.
That's Jennifer Yuengling, the VP of Operations at DG Yuengling and Son Brewery in Pennsylvania and in Florida. Their Oktoberfest is out now on shelves, and that Hershey beer, as you heard, is on its way yet again. My thanks to her for taking the time to talk with me. Before we go, a reminder that this show is produced by Beer Edge. Check out beeredge.com and subscribe to the newsletter, and also download the Beer Edge podcast, hosted by Andy Crouch, with new episodes every week. And check out Steal This Beer and the BYO Nano podcast. And please don't forget to go onto Apple Podcasts or wherever you download and leave a review of this show. If you have questions, suggestions, or guests you'd like to hear, you can email me at johnholl, that's JOHNHOLL, at beeredge.com, or reach out on Twitter at John_Hall. Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed the logo, and my thanks so much to you for listening. I'm John Hall. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer.